So a knight, a Viking, and a samurai walk into a bar. I ducked. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show where we treat old grade school playground debates with a seriousness usually reserved for postgraduate dissertations. But before we begin, quick shout out to Felipe Silva from the Notification Squad, the official first comment on the Bottle Flip episode. Thanks for being a loyal bell ringer. You're like the Red Cross at Christmas, except on YouTube all year long. And not for charity, unless you consider subscribing to this channel an act of charity, which isn't that far from the truth. Anyway, back to the subject of classic playground debates. 2 words, they rock. Pirate versus ninja, plants versus zombies, Superman versus Goku. Who doesn't love these classic what-if scenarios where you smash your favorite fictional or not so fictional worlds together to award someone the deadliest warrior of all time gold star? Well, Ubisoft took that to its logical extreme and made it into an entire video game, For Honor, a game seemingly created to answer one age-old 3-way battle scenario: Knight versus Viking versus Samurai. It's a game that's been on my and many other gamers' watch lists since first debuting at E3 back in 2015, and with its Valentine's release right around the corner, I'm gearing up to break some hearts and shatter some skulls during this holiday of love. But which faction should you choose? Sure, I could just choose the one that's most in line with my personality, but screw that, I'm here to win! And past episodes here have shown that knowledge of cultural history can help you win games. So between these 3 factions, one has to have the upper hand, right? Maybe the game is balanced, but history wasn't. So it got my theorist brain a-turnin'. Game mechanics aside, when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, who would reign supreme in an actual medieval battle royale? Savage Vikings, knights in shining armor, or the tenacious Japanese samurai? When you start to peel back the myths and legends of these warriors and actually look at the facts around them, a clear winner starts to emerge. So loyal theorist viewers, place your bets now. 3 warriors enter, only 1 warrior will leave. Let's start by getting our bearings. Between Vikings, knights, and samurai, there's almost 2,000 years of human history to cover, and that is a ton of time. You can imagine it creates a few problems with comparing these 3 groups. For instance, it may be easy to say that a European knight clad entirely in Gothic plate armor would destroy a Viking, but that's kind of like saying 10 dudes with M16s could have won the Revolutionary War. Sure, the machine gun and the Revolutionary War are within 2,000 years of each other, but it's unfair to place super advanced technology into that sort of battle. So in an attempt to make a fair comparison all around, you have to take into consideration time period. And to For Honor's credit, the game selected 3 types of warriors that were active in the world at the same time. When you draw a Venn diagram of all the time periods samurai, Viking, and knights were active, you get one major area of overlap: the 11th century, the year 1000, a time before steel plate, gunpowder, and even Twitter. Truly, these were the dark ages. Or maybe it was the age of enlightenment. Depends on how you look at Twitter. As such, in order to keep this battle fair, their 11th century armor, weaponry, and tactics are what they're gonna be limited to in the arena. Now, let's meet our challengers! In this corner, coming in from Japan and standing at a whopping 5 foot 3 inches, they put the feud in feudal. It's the Samurai! Hailing from the icy lands of Scandinavia with a height of 5 foot 7 inches, they take an arrow in the knee and keep on kicking. It's the Viking! And finally, coming straight out of the European Dark Ages in style, standing at 5 foot 8 inches tall, he's your man in shining armor. It's the Knight! Wait. Hold your jock jams. Are you serious? 5 foot 3 inches tall. A Viking is 5 foot 7 on average? I'm taller than that. I thought these warriors were pillars of testosterone, drinking their power thirst and getting their swole on one axe swung at a time. Especially the Viking. But looking at the scientific evidence and researching this episode, it just isn't true. Skeletal evidence reveals that due to poor nutrition back in ye olden times, humans were the same height, if if not shorter than what they are now. Sure, these warriors seem mythological in our minds, but that's because the mythology is all people really know. The only records we have about the Vikings, for instance, is the stuff that was written by people who had just had their villages ransacked by the guys, and also the Icelandic sagas. It's basically if our only records of American history were the tall tales of Paul Bunyan and his giant blue ox. So okay, none of our warriors are technically The Rock. But if physicality isn't gonna separate these guys out, let's look at their backgrounds. Vikings come from Scandinavia, and the fact that Vikings had to live in this frozen nightmare without electric blankets and central heating should be enough credential to give them their badass card. Since they lived in a place where food literally dies immediately, they stayed alive almost entirely by stealing from other people. They did this by striking hard and fast at vulnerable targets like monasteries and wealthy villages before fading into the foggy mists on their massive warships. Their weapons were generally garbage. Again, that whole frozen tundra thing, with only the most basic of offenses: a bow and a shield on their back, a spear for throwing, and an axe in their belt, or, if they were particularly well off, a sea axe, a sort of short sword knife hybrid that was perfect for up-close encounters. But if they were minimal on the offensive front, they were practically nudists on the defensive front. Vikings, as if going for maximum machismo, were practically nothing for protection from either people or the threat of icicles to the crotch. The wealthiest Vikings wore hardened leather, but most just had quilted fabric, so one good shot from a bow and boom, you're done, son. Now, to For Honor's credit, the game gets all of this right. One look at the warlords, berserkers, and raiders, and you immediately see light armor, if at all, and rudimentary shields and axes. Even the Valkyrie is appropriate, as Viking culture required men, children, and women to know how to fight. Though I gotta dock you a bit for the horned helmet. True loyal theorists know that those originated in the Bronze Age back in 3300 BC, not Viking times in 1000 AD. But I guess Skyrim got it wrong too, so you're in good company. So you're probably wondering, why did Vikings wear the medieval equivalent of tissue paper? Sounds like a bad idea for a society built around fighting and raiding, right? Well, it's actually for two reasons. One, they got around by boat all the time, and you don't want to go overboard in iron. Anchors away! Also, iron rusts into powder in the presence of salt water, so not the best idea. Two, wearing light armor allowed them to have maximum mobility. When you're jumping off a ship to raid a lightly guarded town, you don't want to be weighed down by unnecessary armor, even if you've been keeping up with leg day. It's funny, we think of Vikings as slow, hulking tanks, but in actuality, speed and intimidation were their best friends. If they were pro StarCraft players, they'd exclusively use cheese and all-in tactics. The risk here, though, of course, is that if they ran into someone who knew what they were doing, didn't panic, and was more well-equipped and trained, well, they would easily crumble. And that, honestly, is why the Vikings would lose to both the samurai and the knights. It's not even worth carrying to the end of the episode. These guys are dead as soon as they hit the battlefield. Let's play it out. The Viking sprints into the arena, chest bared in a daring display of bravery, and ooh, there's a samurai arrow in the back. Oh, and that's the knight's blade to the side. The Viking makes one last-ditch effort swinging his axe, but it's rejected. His rudimentary armaments are no match for the finely crafted weaponry of the knight and the samurai. Some armor beats no armor, bro. No amount of bravery and pectoral bulk can combat a lack of equipment. You can shout as much as you like, berserkers, but it ain't gonna stop a knight's arrow into your chest, or a finely tempered samurai blade through the neck, which leaves us with two: the knights and the samurai. After centralized governments dissolved during the Dark Ages, different towns became vulnerable to raiding cultures like the Vikings, and this shaped the face of war in Europe for centuries. Huge castles became the norm because they offered protection from the poorly equipped raiding parties. A group of Vikings coming for your stuff? Well, just haul butt into your castle, close the doors, and wait for them to leave. What are they gonna do? Flex their pectorals intimidatingly at the front gate, hoping that it crumbles in fear? I don't think so. And with castles came knights, mounted warriors with heavy offense and defense. Offensively in the 11th century, knights were all about swords and spears, or more accurately, long swords and polearms. Polearms would allow you to attack others from horseback fairly easily without dismounting, and off-the-horse longswords were perfect for melee, heavy enough to daze someone if you knocked him in the helmet, but also able to penetrate armor if you stabbed with the tip. Look no further than the Warden class of For Honor for some really accurate knight weaponry. But for as correct as the weapon is, is just ignore his armor because what the knights wear in For Honor is a bit too modern for our battle royale today. You see, this is plate armor, iron and steel plates forming a barrier around the body. And while partial plate armor was used by the ancient Greeks and Romans, it became much less popular in the 11th century because it was really hard to make and cost some serious cash. Ugh, is that full plate armor? Ugh, so 300 BC. It wouldn't become popular again until the late 13th century, meaning it would be appropriate for For Honor, but is off the table for our 11th century battle. Instead, knights of the 11th century wore the hauberk, a shirt made out of rings of iron linked together that could protect your major organs from everything that wasn't a direct shot from a longbow. Combined with full helmets, a horse that lets you outmaneuver any threat, and a heavy shield, knights were leagues beyond Vikings. Which finally brings us across the world to Japan, to a time before anime body pillows and automatic toilets, when the land was ruled by lords vying for power over each other. We think of samurai as being these honorable, katana-brandishing master duelists, but in the 11th century, this wasn't the case at all. During the early Heian period in Japan, these warriors were among some of the wealthiest members of their respective clans, and were mostly used by the emperor to squash rebellions by the peasants. They were the 1%, just, you know, instead of power suits and expensive haircuts, they sported amazing armor and would shoot you in the gut with an arrow if you protested. Like the knights, early samurai were master practitioners of Kyudo, the art of mounted archery. While they did later evolve into other skills like swordplay with a katana, deadly ranged combat is where they shined most in these early days. And not just archery, archery on horseback. Their equipment was simple: a yumi, a yabira, and most importantly, a horse. Defensively, remember that samurai were among the wealthiest people in Japan, and as a result, they had all the best toys. They were basically the kids who grew up having a Power Wheels in every game system. Whereas Vikings had padded cloth and knights had ring mail, samurai had oyuroi, forged from metal plates laced together with hardened leather and covered with lacquer to keep them from rusting. These things were some of the best armor in the world. And while the knights' hauberks covered just their torsos, samurai had huge helmets, masks, sleeves, and greaves. This stuff was rugged, strong, and best of all, light. It hardly impacted their ability to move freely. Of course, it took an immense amount of skill to make it and was incredibly expensive, but remember, samurai made it rain, so no worries for them there. In short, their motto was to keep your opponent at a distance, riddle them with arrows, and overpower them with your excessive bank accounts. If Batman were a medieval warrior, he'd be a samurai, zipping around on his Batmobile horse and smacking villains in the face with his wads of cash.
You think you have a chance against me? I'm rich. I'm Samurai Batman.
A samurai's weakness, though? Close combat. Sure, once they got equipped with a katana in later eras, like you see in For Honor, they were fine. But in the 11th century, they were incredibly susceptible to close-ranged combat. So to counter this, they usually had an entourage of people equipped with polearms and swords to keep them protected from enemies just running up and taking down their horse. Money, not only buying you the coolest toys, but also buying you friends to protect you on the fields of battle. So there you have it, 3 classes of warriors, 3 possible victors in our hypothetical battle, For Honor. Well, actually 2, because the Vikings are clearly outmatched. So who wins, knights or samurai? In the words of another great YouTube channel, it's time for a death battle. Let the battle begin. Here come both our challengers now, riding into the arena. Knights and samurai, both mounted warriors, so this is to be expected. And oh, there goes the knight's horse, struck with a samurai's arrow. He goes down hard. The reach of that polearm just can't match the distance the samurai can fire his bow. But can the knight recover? He's reaching, trying to take down the samurai's horse, but that samurai is just too mobile. And oh, there's the killing blow. That chainmail hauberk's just not strong enough to repel the samurai's repeated arrow volley atop his horse. Were we later in history, with the knights equipped with armor like you see in For Honor, the samurai's arrow volley would have had a difficult time penetrating the heavy mail. But remember, our knights only have their hauberks. Sturdy armor to be sure, but weak to arrows, especially a repeated arrow volley coming from horseback. Had this battle been able to go to melee combat, the results might have been different, but based on the period appropriate armor, battle tactics, and weaponry, in the end, the samurai in an unexpected twist, takes the day. And just because I know that you're wondering it, the same would be true in the fictional scenario presented in For Honor. The strength and increased mobility of the samurai's armor and the addition of melee weapons would eventually overwhelm the slower, more tank-like knights. But when you truly stop to look at these victories, they're not for the reasons that you would have expected. In the end, it doesn't really come down to tactics, formations, strongholds, or training. It comes down to one weapon that you don't normally think about on the fields of war. Money. Money for better, lighter armor, money for stronger, longer weapons, money enough to live on so that you can go out and learn ridiculous skills like archery on horseback. Sure, money may not buy happiness, but it will buy you a pile of armaments. So the moral of today's story is this: when you're in a war, money truly is the greatest weapon of all. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. So, knowing that, which class will you choose? Click on one of the 3 options to cast your vote: Knight, Viking, or Samurai. We'll see if my historical analysis actually swayed some of you. You know, funny enough, in an ironic twist, I think based on the story of For Honor, the samurai are supposed to be the underdogs. Oh, the other 2 factions have a big surprise coming their way. Anyway, a special thanks to Moose Knuckle, Cartoons, and my buddy, Gerard the Completionist, for letting me use their battle tactics footage throughout this video. Each of these guys actually covered a different one of the factions, so if you're interested in more, click on your favorites. And lastly, one final thank you to Ubisoft for making this video possible. Perhaps I too one day will be able to rise to the ranks of the noble samurai. Haha, who am I kidding? Those guys were stacked. Anyway, see you all next week for the epic conclusion to the Gaster theory. Have a great week.